and well, Alice Johnston. I didn't know them until today. It was that just Googling and doing, I found some YouTube videos, and I found this platform called Gorilla that I think is very interesting. It's a platform to do experiments, and I asked Joe to share their experience, the use of this platform. So I think we can get like really interesting ideas from your thesis or from your research in your universities or for any kind of research that you want to do in the future. So Joe, go ahead. It's all yours. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, David, for the warm welcome. So yeah, my thing is all about online behavioral research methods. Thank you for welcoming here today. I'm really looking to chatting with you after I've shared some slides. I've been helping researchers like you take behavioral projects online since about 2012. So that's nearly 10 years now. First of all, I launched a company called Cauldron, and we helped researchers on an individual basis. Then we launched the Gorilla Experiment Builder, which is how David found us. And also I host and convene a conference called Be Online, which is all about behavioral science online. We launched that in 2018, and it will be coming up soon in 2020. So if you want to see a whole load of other behavioral research, do make sure you get the details of that before the end of the talk. Due to the pandemic, many more researchers are now interested in taking research online. And I'm here to help you on that journey and answer any questions that you may have. Today, I plan to talk about the benefits of taking research online, the challenges of taking behavioral research online, a little bit about Gorilla, some practical steps that you guys can take if you're inspired to want to take your research online, and also to share some inspirational stories to give you some idea of what might be possible. The key benefit to online behavioral research is the increased speed, scale, and reach. Even before the pandemic, researchers were taking behavioral research online in order to speed up data collection and increase sample sizes. You can get 500 participants to take part in a lunch break. It's really quite incredible for those of us used to testing participants one by one in the lab. But you can also reach niche groups of participants that help you answer questions that couldn't practically be answered in the lab. So altogether, this gives us better, more reproducible research. And it sounds like you guys aren't typically doing experiments, or maybe you're doing some survey research online, but what we're really talking about is taking behavioral research, like measuring how people behave, so that we can make predictions about their behavior in the future. And of course, David and I were just talking about how people respond to advertising. Wouldn't it be great to run experiments online where you expose people to different bits of advertising, then see how they behave in a shopping task, for instance, and then be able to make quite strong statements about the causality between the advert and their behavior? So even though there was an upward trajectory before COVID, and you can see this upward trajectory here, it was quite shallow. What we hear from our clients is that COVID was the push they needed to take their research online. You can see we've had a huge amount of growth over the last year. And that without Gorilla, they'd have lost a year's worth of research time because they couldn't get participants into their universities anymore. So those are the benefits of online research. But what are the challenges? Researchers have been running surveys online for over 20 years, but surveys, as we know, don't measure behavior. And this is in fact why Gorilla is called Gorilla. I was talking with a collaborator and they said, I just want a bit bigger and better version of SurveyMonkey, but specifically for behavioral research. And I said, oh, you want a Survey Gorilla? And the name stuck. A second challenge is technical complexity. Behavioral scientists are an impressive bunch. You guys are an impressive bunch. You know the science of what you're doing, you know the statistics, you know the interview techniques, you know the user experience. And in the lab, many have coded their own experiments using MATLAB or other programming languages. But taking research online is a whole different ballgame. Not impossible, but it's a lot. The additional complexity of managing server architecture and databases is beyond most experimental psychologists, let alone jumping through the data security and legal hurdles. So for them, cloud tools allowing them to take research online without getting bogged down in the programming. So good tools also allow you to save a lot of time. I've worked with researchers who've spent months creating their protocol in MATLAB, and we've replicated their study in under an hour. But the third and most important challenges of online behavioral research are concerns about the data quality when you can't see your participants. Or at least that's how it is for the experimental psychologists who we've worked with. What they're used to is a participant coming into their lab, and they interact with them, and we can watch them complete the task. We can make sure they're in a quiet, distraction-free room and sat at a sensible workspace. We don't have that luxury with online research. We can't monitor online participants in the same way. But really, this is just an illusion of control. When we're in the lab, we may be able to control the environment, but we're not able to control their attention. They may look like they're paying attention, but maybe they're thinking about what they're having for dinner, or something else. Or an argument they had with a friend yesterday. And an objective measure of attention would use an objective measure of their attention, and therefore the data quality you're getting from the task would use their task performance. So for some research, it's useful to be able to monitor participants throughout. For example, to make sure they've understood complicated instructions. So what some researchers have done is made really great use of Zoom calls to ensure they can answer any questions from their participants. Another big concern is often, will my data be good enough quality? Generally, researchers have been pleasantly surprised with the data they have collected online, but it's probably best to see it for yourself. What's truly exciting is the ever-exceeding limits of what research can be taken online. In this Twitter thread, you can see one researcher has found a way to take mass priming studies online. Here he is, Colin. But Kathy doesn't believe it was possible. So it starts off with Manos saying, has anybody ever taken subliminal priming studies online successfully? And Kathy responds and says, nah, we tried it. It's not possible. And Colin jumps in and says, yep, it can be done. So, there are researchers all over the world testing the limits of what's possible and finding ways to make their research possible, because the gains, if you can make it work, are so enormously great. So that's where we were coming from when we started creating the Gorilla Experiment Builder. We knew that researchers wanted to get all of these benefits of taking research online, and we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them to succeed. So our vision is to make it as easy to run online behavioral research as to run surveys. We've started with classic psychological tasks, but we're adding more tools as we go. So within Game Builder, there is a survey builder. So sort of an equivalent to Qualtrics, a little bit simpler to use. A task builder, which is for building traditional psychological tasks. So where you see an image or hear a sound or see a video and then respond with buttons. So it might be a keyboard click or a mouseboard click or press with a button, and you get the reaction times in the background. There's a code editor for anybody who wants to build something completely novel but doesn't want to dial up all of their own server architecture, because, oh my gosh, you guys are researchers and behavioral scientists and you've already got plenty on your plate. You certainly don't need to become a software engineer as well. There's a game builder. So it's a sort of simpler, it's for two-dimensional games. So if any of you are familiar with Unity, which is a three-dimensional game engine, this is just a slightly simpler two-dimensional game engine. But you can make little games, interactive things, fun experiences for testing more naturalistic experiences. And I'll tell you a little bit more. I'll show you a case study relating to that in a little bit. And then we've also got a shop builder tool, which is where you can run shopping experiments. So it's sort of, to your participant, it looks like a normal online shop, but in the back end, you've got all of these different levers that you can pull to change taxes and subsidies and the products and the labeling, so that you can test different hypotheses. Once the components of your, and I should say we've got more tools coming soon. We're currently working on a multiplayer tool as well as a UX tool. So we're planning to add more into this whole ecosystem of tools that could be needed for where you want to see how somebody behaves. Now, once you've created all of your different components, the experiment tree allows you to combine them creatively in a wide range of ways. The beauty of the experiment tree is that it's really easy to understand the flow of participants through your experiments. And that means also all the nodes in your experiments can be reused. So let me just talk you through this. This is a simple within subject design. So everybody starts here. Green ones are questionnaires. So you get the consent questionnaire. We always ask for consent. Then you get the demographic questionnaire. And then here we've got a relational reasoning task and an affect task before we hit a finish node. And here, because of this orange node, this is what we call a control node, a powerful node. Those two nodes, the relational reasoning and affect test, will be counterbalanced between participants. So some will get them in this order and some will get them in the other order. And that allows you to test statistically that the order of the tasks isn't having an effect. This would be an example of a between subject task. So you see all the first bit is the same, but now we have a randomizer this way. And now we've got one group going to a relational reasoning task on this side and another group going on a relational reasoning task on that side. And you could make a change between the relational reasoning task on the two sides to see what impact that has on people's performance. And then both groups finish. But if, for instance, you wanted to test people in two different shops, so one on what we were talking about, David, earlier, alcohol consumption, one here where alcohol is heavily taxed, where another one on this side, alcohol isn't taxed, but the net effect is the same price, then you could see which one has a bigger impact on purchasing behavior. And then you can see here, this is what happens when you combine order nodes and randomizing nodes together. We've got consent demographics, then you've got an affect test as your pre-test and your affect test as your end test, before and after an intervention. And those are, again, counterbalanced so that you can check that your two stimuli sets are the same level of difficulty. And here we have a randomizer in here going to one group over this side, which is your control group, and your other group over here, which is your treatment group. And what that gives you is a classic randomized control trial design, whereby you can see whether this treatment condition has an effect on somebody's performance between the pre-test here and the post-test there. What's really powerful here is that if as a group there are typical standard tasks that you use to measure, let's say, personality traits or something in particular that you as a group have designed that you want to use again and again, then you can just create that once and then reuse it in all of your experiments because we have such a modular approach. The other thing that people love about this is, of course, there's no coding. This provides a no coding interface for randomization and counterbalances and repeating trials. It's really very powerful. Most importantly, with Gorilla, you're never alone. We have 3 full-time psych graduates on our support desk who answer all of our questions, and they answer them usually within 48 hours and often faster. This is Katrina Kuhn from Potsdam University in Germany. We were asking, she shared this in our Facebook group, that in their local Berlin Zoo, they have a real gorilla who's just had babies. And with gorilla support, she feels just as safe and welcome as these tiny sweeties do in BB's arms. So we really are a very welcoming and friendly community over here at Gorilla, and incredibly helpful. And we just want to see you guys succeed and take away some of the bits that are really difficult in being a behavioral scientist. Finally, I wanted to mention collaboration. Collaboration is great. Working with other researchers is fun and allows skills to be combined. Gone are the days when we try and send a collaborator an experiment file that they are unlikely to open. All users of Gorilla are on the same version, so it's really easy to share tasks. We've built collaboration into Gorilla so that it's easy for research teams and students to work together on the same project. So if somebody got in touch with you and said, "Oh, I read your paper. I saw that you used this really amazing novel task. I'd love to use something similar or do a replication. Could you please send me a copy?" You just go to your task, press send, type in their email. That's it. It turns up in their library. They don't have access to any of their data. They just have access to your task. Or this one, you're working with somebody at the same university or another university, and you want to add somebody to your project so that you can work on it together. You go settings, collaborate, and there you go. They have access. The final thing we have in Gorilla that we're tremendously proud about is Gorilla Open Materials. This is completely at your discretion, but when you're writing your paper, if you think, wow, my materials are amazing, I'd love other people to run replications and extensions of this, I think it would be really valuable. What you can do is you can publish your materials to Gorilla Open Materials. So this is our open access repository for sharing materials with other researchers. And then anyone in the world can preview the task. And you can, by just clicking the preview button, And by clicking the clone button, you can clone it into, somebody would be able to clone it into their own Gorilla project and launch a replication in just 3 clicks. And so it's really to address a situation where you're going, have you ever read a paper and thought, I'd love to replicate that, but how can I make sure I've replicated their methods fully? So Gorilla Open Materials is designed to solve that problem by giving you access to the full experiment protocol. Oh, I went the wrong way there. So now I want to talk a little bit about practical advice for taking your first study online. So the first thing is to choose the right study. My recommendation would be to pick something simple that where you have the lab data, something that you've done in the lab before. And it might be that you guys don't have lab data because you're not experimentalists, but in which case you're just going to have to try something new. But it's easier to start with a replication of your own work so that you're only wrestling with a few novel elements and can assess the data quality from your online study against lab data that you already have. Once you've chosen the right study to take online, your next thing to do is to build it. So choose a platform and build your study. Good platforms will offer weekly onboarding webinars to get you started as easily as possible. Make sure you attend them. They're really designed to get you off the ground as quickly as possible. After that, to run experiments, you're going to need ethics from your ethics board. If you're replicating something you've done in the lab, then this is going to be really straightforward because you're reusing that old ethics application with just a minor variation. The main change will be around the data security of your selected platform, and good platforms will have pre-drafted text for ethics boards and InfoSec reviews so that you don't have to engage with the niggly technically bits, and it will be sure to go through first time. Once you've got ethics, the next thing is to pilot your study. Lots. You've got to pilot it a lot to make sure that it's working. First, you're going to test it on yourself. Then you'd maybe test it on some of your other colleagues and your team, and then maybe a small sample online. What some researchers do a pilot with participants over Zoom, and it may take, because that allows them to understand maybe where participants are tripping over, what they're doing, what they're not understanding. It may take a while to get your protocol to work online, but you'll get there in the end. Think of this as an important period of methodological experimentation, trying different approaches and see what gives you the best data. Piloting your study this way will help you convince yourself that you're getting good enough quality data, and will help you identify appropriate exclusion criteria for participants in your real study. Generally, we find researchers are pleasantly surprised. Many researchers try to keep studies under 20 minutes because that's where you get the best attention from your participants, but there are techniques for longer testing sessions. Another option is to pre-register your study, both as predicted and the OSF, the Open Science Framework, allow you to do this easily. Pre-registration is really useful if you want to, as it helps you convince reviewers that you haven't cherry-picked the data. There are quite a few concerns at the moment that if you're able to get 500 participants online really quickly, then you could do so and then just pick a subset of participants to publish to say, oh, these are the ones where I found my effect. But if you've pre-registered the study, that it's less likely to be the case. Then once you've finished pre-registering it, then you need to collect your data. There are lots of options for recruiting participants. The fastest is to use a paid for recruitment service like MTurk or Prolific. But you can also use Reddit, newspaper or radio media coverage, or Facebook groups, or by partnering with charities. In terms of payment, the general advice is to pay all participants who complete your study, regardless of whether you use your data or not. If you exclude them, consider adding them to your own personal blacklist of someone you wouldn't hire again to do your work. But if they did the work for you, even if you don't like the quality of their work, you should pay them. Then once you've collected all of your data, download it and analyze it, which is the same workflow as before. Bullet 2 on the previous slide was to select the platform and build your study. When evaluating which platform to use for your research, here are 4 questions that you can ask yourself. What features does it have? Does it do what you need it to do? Not just at the task level, but also at the whole experiment protocol level. How supported is the platform? If you get stuck, what are the options for getting unstuck? Do they have a dedicated support team? Is there a community or forum or a group that you can seek advice in there? Are there consultancy options for more complex research so that you can hire somebody to help you? Has the platform been validated? When the platforms make claims about the accuracy of their timing, are they backed up with published research? And 4, will it allow you to focus on the science behind your research ideas, or will it be time consuming and require you to become a computer scientist instead of focusing on your main skill of being a behavioral scientist? Considering these 4 dimensions will help you choose which platform is the best fit for your research. In Gorilla, we have over 100 samples already. Like, these are classic psychology examples. They might not be exactly the right things for you guys, but they're there. They're 100 samples to get you started quickly. So if those are tasks that you'd want to use, then make sure you go and check out our samples list. I wanted to share with you some inspirational stories to give you some ideas of the variety of things that can be, variety of studies that can be taken online. So one of the things I mentioned earlier was our game builder. So in this example, we have 2 alternate forced choice tasks that are common in neuroeconomics and decision making. You're wanting the participant to learn which of these 2 levers they should pull on. Here they won 11 points, and then they choose again. And they lost, they got no points. And this is what a classic task would look like in the lab. And it's a little bit on the dull side. So this is what's called an N-armed bandit, where you choose between slot machines and try and find the one that pays out the most. And it's sort of a probabilistic learning task. This right one is the classic version of the task, similar to what you'd see in the lab. And this is our gamified version built in the game builder. So you see the 2 cards. You pick one, there's a little puff of stars. You see your score go up in the corner. You've got this lovely green mat in the background that looks more like a casino. So you feel a bit like you're playing in an online casino. Gamification can have a huge impact on task motivation and engagement. And another example, Professor Nico Steinbeis took a classic go-no-go task and turned it into a magical story where you hunt for treasure and avoid dragons. And by making it more engaging, he got young children to train on the same game mechanic every day for 8 weeks. We've been chatting to other researchers about using games in research to do developmental research on children. And Dorothy Bishop was saying that when you get children to come into the lab and take part in boring tasks, after about 3 or 4 trials, they're like, can I go now? I'm bored of this now. Whereas Nico had players playing for 10 minutes a day for 8 weeks. Overall, he had about 4,000 trials from the students because the games were so fun and engaging to play. Our vision, I mentioned earlier that we've got the game builder and the shop builder and the UX tool. Our vision here is to create the right tool for everyone and the right tool for you and your specific research. What's most important is that online tasks get the same results as lab-based testing. Here, Bevard et al. Show that an N-armed bandit task, so that's the gamified task that we were just looking at, and you can see the results of the labs and online are almost identical. So here's the lab and online in each graph, and you can see huge overlap in the means between the lab and the online version. Here's another example. This is a fake Airbnb website that we created to show how trust and reputation information shapes our behavior. This is research by Mircea Zlotianu. He's the forensic psych lecturer at Teesside University. And his question was, how do trust and reputation information shape our behavior? He recruited 124 participants through MTurk, and in his experiment, he wanted to manipulate this trust and reputation information to see how it changes renting decisions. So this is an example of what a trial would look like. You were given a certain amount of budget, and these bits of information were hidden, and depending on the trial, maybe different bits of information were hidden. And he was trying to see which bits of information do people reveal, and then what's the quality of decision they make after they've revealed that information. And the conclusion of his research is that humans overly value social information, so people would click on make visible information that was more social over information that was more objective, and that when we look at social information, we overweight that social information. We overweight it in both directions. When it's positive social information, that gives us a halo effect, and negative social information, the opposite. Another type of study that you can do online is eye tracking studies. Eye tracking using home webcams is not as good as the lab, but it can be done well and deliver robust results. In fact, we hosted a Gorilla Presents webinar on this topic and got lots of amazing top tips for getting the best quality eye tracking at home possible. And you can still watch this on our website if that's something that interests you. Ashley, would you mind sharing that into the group chat in case anybody wants to see those videos another time? One of our experts, Jens Madsen, showed a high degree of correlation between lab and home gaze direction trajectories. So you can see this here. You can see generally that in the lab versus in the classroom versus at home. So at home is people doing it online. You can see that the general trend is pretty much the same. In the lab, it's much tighter. There's far less noise around the signal. And at home, you've got a far noisier signal, but you're still tracking the same sorts of behavior. He showed correlations of between 0.9 and 0.8 between home and lab, which is really pretty high. He also showed incredible consistency between eye tracking and behavioral measures, both in the lab and at home, which is really pleasing too. Yeah, and this is the eye and mouse tracking seminar that we did recently. Gorilla Presents. I think Ashley's going to share that link into the chat if she can. If not, we'll send it to David after this presentation. If you're concerned about the quality of at-home eye tracking, think about using mouse tracking instead. Although eye tracking is commonly used to track spatial attention, you can also achieve this with mouse tracking. In the top example, participants clicked on the image to identify which part of the scene caught their attention. So here the computer model prediction is here in white, and the human taking part is this one in red. And you can see the prediction and what's happening online is very highly correlated. In another example, Jonathan Tsai, a PhD student from Every Lab at Berkeley, translated a classic motor adaptation paradigm, normally conducted in the lab by using a robotic arm. Now it's possible to run the same adaptation tasks using a mouse and get similar results online. So what would happen is you reach to get something with your mouse, but then you change the program to put a deviation on the mouse so that even though I think I'm reaching up here, my mouse goes over there, and you're trying to see how quickly somebody can relearn their actions. And you can see that in person it's really much tighter, but online you get the same overall shape, albeit noisier. These tasks are available on Gorilla Open Materials if motor action is your thing. Finally, for us, one of the really big things is the impact of the reduction in technical complexity of taking experimental research online, the implication that has for teaching. Students at UCL start creating their own experiments in their first months at UCL. So they're 18, straight out of school. And by the end of the first month, they're already designing and running their own studies online. Their first one is an IAT, a test of implicit attitudes, where they come up with a whole load of great ideas and they learn how difficult it is to operationalize experiments. So one might come up with something like, so I want to know if blondes, really do have more fun. And they operationalize that as like, blondes, brunettes, pictures of women who are blonde and brunettes, and words to do with fun or more seriousness. And then they run their whole experiment and they design their whole experiment and they show it to their seminar group. And, this was one of the things that happened one year is one of their fellow students turned around and said, no, that's not what you're testing. You've got pictures of blonde women who are all smiling and looking like they're having fun. And you've got pictures of women with brown hair and wearing glasses. And so it's the pictures that are fun or serious, not our implicit associations. So it shows the students how important it is, exactly what stimuli you need to pick. I quite like the line it's going to start badly when you learn something new. I always think of this when I'm coaching my children. It's going to start badly because the first time you try anything, it doesn't usually work. But if you practice it and practice it and practice it and run new studies, you get better at it over time. And by the end of their first year, these students are designing their own interventions to test which psychological nudges increase charitable giving. So the way that project by the end of the year goes is that, in a nutshell, the lecturer designs the control condition, a straight ask for a donation to a charity that the students have chosen. And then each group of students is challenged to come up with the best intervention they can, which will get run before the straight ask, the control condition, in order to increase donations to the charity. And they're allowed to use any of the psychological theory they've learnt across the last year. They can test psychological theories, group membership, framing, anchoring, persuasion, and they discover for themselves which ones work and which ones don't. And in the process, they also raise money.
No sound, Joe.
Yeah, Joe, you seem to have disappeared.
Yeah, we lost you.
Still nothing, Joe.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey, phew. Don't know what happened there. Woohoo! I'm so pleased. So hopefully you heard what I said about the students and that they managed to raise money for their selected charity. Overall, it's an impressive learning experience where students learn valuable applied digital experimentation skills that they can take into academia or they can take into future careers. Another tool that we have is the Gorilla Shop Builder. To your participants, it looks like an experiment like this. It looks like a normal online shop to maximize realism. So you upload your own product sets, you set the pricing, you set delivery, you could put adverts in there if you want. But behind the scenes, there's a whole world of research tools to test a wide range of psychological nudges. We know A/B testing is an alternative approach. So if in industry, what people might do is A/B test on their live site and try different nudges on their live site. But oftentimes clients just don't want that disruption, or they may want to test ideas without making the commitment to follow through. Or if you're experimenters, you might want to see, well, if we change adverts in this way or that way, does it allow consumers to make purchases that are more in line with what they actually desire? So I wanted to mention Shop Builder. There, if you're hungry for the ability to test different psychological nudges in a consumer psychological environment, this might be a great tool for you. So this brings us to the end of our talk. So to recap, today I've spoken about the benefits, the speed, scale, and the reach of online behavioral research, the technical and data challenges when you can't see your participants, and Gorilla's modular design with multiple specialist tools, 7 practical steps to take your first project online, some inspirational stories, including UX, gamification, eye tracking, mouse tracking, and teaching, and the shop builder from researchers that have successfully taken research online. One other thing I wanted to mention is that our Be Online conference, our conference all about online behavioral research, is back. Ashley, could you share the link to the website into the chat if you can?
I'm unfortunately unable to access the chat, but what I can do is I can send the link and all the other resources after this talk, and we'll make sure that you all have access to those.
Yeah, or if you're on Twitter, follow us at BeOnlineConf, and hopefully we will see some of you there. I'd now be really delighted to answer any questions that you may have. Yeah, let me stop presenting. Hello, I'm back.
Thank you very much, Joe. Questions, preguntas, dudas?
So again, sorry, I missed that.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Thank you very much, Joe. Guys, do you have questions, preguntas, dudas? David, ¿tienes alguna pregunta? Okay. 1 second. Oh.
Okay, so let me start. I think it's fascinating, Joe. Thank you so much. I feel like so excited. I wanted to start like trying it immediately. Yeah. So, like,
oh, lovely. Can you put your video on? Because I'd love to meet you. It's one of the, for me, the highlights is just to be able to meet researchers. Is that okay?
Sure. Okay, sure. Yeah.
Hello.
Yes. Hi. How are you?
Very well.
Great. Okay. So, well, this is very new, and I'm so excited to learn that there is such an amazing tool that it can be so helpful to us, right? So, let's say, because right now I'm planning to have like a focus group, and I want to talk with entrepreneurs and startups and SMEs, owners and managers. How would a focus group could be worked out with your platform? How could be done? Like, how does it work?
I don't know. I don't think we've ever done a focus group side because we're really interested in behavior. So for you, what's important? What is it when you run a focus group? What's the data that you're trying to get out of it?
Well, actually, and it's interesting because it's pretty much related to one of the examples that you shared, the survey with the Airbnb, the mock-up, because my research is all about trust, and also there is a little bit of cognitive biases because you said that that is a halo effect when they see the social information more prominently. So I wanted to understand what do they have in their minds when they are planning their initial communication strategy, because I want to identify how biased they can be, and because I want to understand how they plan to be trustworthy, how they plan to convey their identity and everything in order to become and to be perceived as trustworthy brands. So the focus group should be because I really want to understand, what's in their minds. And well, that was the initial plan. But of course, that if there is anything else that I can do, I'm always.
So if I was trying to do a behavioral implementation of that, what I would do is I would go to a number of websites that are equivalent of the type of businesses you want to survey, right? And I would maybe get 20, 50 of them. And then I take their websites and do an image of their websites, and I would use mouse view. Mouse view is really cool. It obscures the whole web page, but gives you a little view through which you can see the website. And then I would track which bits of the websites they look at to see what's important information for them to assess the trustworthiness of their brand. So I'd go, here's an image, look at it for 5 seconds. And then I'd ask them the question, how trustworthy do you think is this brand? And then I'd give them another trial and another trial. What you find is a lot of websites put this information in the same place. And so out of that data, you would get behavioral measures of where do people go looking for this information, and what information do they rest on at the end, and how persuasive was that information in the end on trustworthiness, authority, the next aspect. And you don't run it as a focus group, right? You do this person, each one individually, and now you get fit. Like, I don't know how many entrepreneurs or participants you'd be assessing, right? But if you've got data from 100, you've now got 100 individual people's assessments of these websites, what information they go to, and what you're looking for is the correlations between them. And if they're all going to the same place for authority information or to understand what the product is, then you're like, okay, these are the cultural norms that we have of where you go for that information. Was that useful?
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Thank you. Very good. Yeah, definitely. I'll be following you guys and maybe, get in touch soon so I can get
fantastic.
into more details.
Ashley, can you make sure that Nivea gets sent the mouse view information at the end of this?
Yeah,
fantastic.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Who's next? Questions are my favorite thing, honestly.
Hello.
Hello. Share your screen. I'd really love to see you. Hi, Erica. Nice to meet you.
Hey, hello. Nice to meet you. And thank you very much for your presentation. I wanted to ask if I listened well. Could we use this tool for test a web page who is existing? Is for existing website to test?
So you can put things into an iframe in Gorilla, but I think that would be pretty hard to do. It's sort of in what do you want to, let me ask it differently. What do you want to test of this website? Do you want to test the UX? Do you want to test the imagery? Like, what's your research question?
I wanted to test, well, it is not in my research, but in a future research, I wanted to test how the students use the web page of a university, in which kind of things they are more interested to look for,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we don't yet have so within Gorilla there is a code editor, and if you've got access to your university website code, which you might be able to get because it might just be from their marketing site, you might be able to get that code and put that into the Gorilla code editor and have a simulation of the university website, and then you could track where they click and what they look at and what they find useful. But that's probably not the most useful. A different way of approaching the same thing would be on a trial by trial basis, is you just take screenshots of the university page and you get them, and because then you can interleave, right? Here's a screenshot of the page, and then you can ask them some questions. What did you find most useful on this page? What things did you want to click on? And then you do the next page and you can ask them again, because actually you're wanting to elicit information from them. And just like, if the university website will have all of the Google analytics coming through it, where you can extract raw behavior on the site, right? Yeah. The reason they're not looking at that is it's too complicated, and they don't want to. So maybe a better way to do it is with the screenshots and to ask them. It's like, and you could give them different tasks depending on like what, you could ask them first. What are the top 3 things that you want your university website to provide? And they say thing A, thing B, and thing C. And then you go looking at the university website here, in order to get thing A, what would you go and click on? And then you can see where you would find out what are the most important things and whether it's clear where they should go.
And we can use this tool for that.
I mean, it's not an obvious choice to use. I mean, you can, because you can, a screenshot is just an image, right?
Yeah.
And then you're interleaving screenshots and questions to say, which is the right way. That's not we're typically involved at doing stuff for experimental psychologists. So UX research we've got a tool for UX research which is in development at the moment. We haven't yet fully developed it now, but maybe in the next year this is something we'd be able to do really easily with you, and that would be super cool.
Yeah, it could be. And one more extra
Yes.
question. And do we need extra material for the eye tracker?
No, that's all included in the base package. So your participant will obviously need a webcam of some sorts, but given the last year, I think everybody now has a webcam because we've spent our whole year on Zooms calls. But no, it's just if you sign up to Gorilla, there's an eye tracking zone. It might be in closed beta, in which case you need to go and request access to it. But that's just so that we have a list of who is using it. But you don't have to pay any money to gain access to it. It's
and it could be used for the cell phone too.
Yes, Gorilla works on smartphones and on iPads. You obviously need to pilot it on that device to make sure that the layout of your stimuli is sensible and appropriate. But yes, it works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
No, you're very welcome. Nice to meet you, Erica.
Nice to meet you.
Who's next? Hello,
Hi.
David.
This is David. I'm not a student anymore. I'm a teacher now, but I might have a tricky question here, but does Gorilla make the calculations, for instance, student's T?
Sorry, does the Gorilla make the calculations? What type of calculation?
To calculate the p-value, for instance.
No, so we're not an analysis platform. We're the side for creating the experimental procedure, and we calculate all the raw metrics, but you then need to download them and do your data pre-processing and analysis in R. I know survey tools do now do some of that analytic stuff, but when it comes to behavioral tasks, it's so much more complicated. How do you want to sum across trials? Do you want to average across trials? Which trials should you exclude? So it's just, that's a level of complexity that isn't yet built into Gorilla.
Actually, if you want to know, do you know the company Typeform?
I do, yes.
I asked them the same question, and they said that they are planning to do something, but it's too difficult and it's too complicated to it's the same answer.
Okay, it is really complicated.
It is.
We have long-term plans. I don't think they'll happen in the next 3 years to build a data pre-processing engine into the back of Gorilla, because we can imagine that as people are generating larger and larger data sets, it's not going to be feasible to download them and change them on your computer. You're going to need to do your pre-processing on our server, and then you might be able to get the data into the right shape on our server, at which point you then might be able to configure your own statistical tests on our server, so you could do it all on our server side. But I don't think we'll ever be able to guess from your experimental design what the appropriate statistical test is, because that is always a nuanced decision that involves.
Well, the researcher has to decide, but also it's kind of like mind map, I would say, a decision map. I would say that it's like if it complies with two groups of in each variable, then you go for students T. But if the data is not normal, it's not a Gaussian distribution, then you have to take the non-parametric test. And if it's 3 values or more, then you go for ANOVA. It needs a lot of work in the, I would say, computer department to make the decision, but someday.
Someday. That's why I think it's probably a long-term project. Also, with Gorilla, do you remember that modular design? It's like, well, sure, I've got that metric out of this task, but I had this metadata. Do you want it split by congruent and incongruent trials, or did you want it split by this thing? Or did you want to correlate that with the personality metric that you got earlier, or were you just getting that for giggles? So, it's complicated, but hopefully one day we'll get there.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome, David.
I don't know if David Roca is still here because
I'm here. Still
okay.
Here.
Anyone else with hand raised up?
Oh. Joe, I have a last question because we finish around 6. Mm-hmm. What's the main difference among you guys and the famous Qualtrics, this platform that is
Yeah, let me go back to a slide. Can you see my presentation? Let me see if I can get back to the right slide. So Qualtrics is a survey platform, right?
Yeah, and I have a second question. Do you have discount for students, PhD students? That's important to know.
Yeah. So the commercial rate is £2 per participant, and if you're an academic, it's less than half of that, 85p per participant. And if you go and buy a researcher license, it's even cheaper still. So you get a 50% discount compared to the commercial rate for being students and academics.
Perfect.
So Qualtrics is just a survey builder, right? That's it. No task builder, no code editor, no games builder, no shop builder, no experiment design tool. It's just a survey builder. So that's sort of the big difference between us and Qualtrics.
Clear to me.
Yeah. All right. I will stop sharing. There must be a place where I can stop sharing. Have I stopped sharing? No. I've rarely used, there it must be this, stop sharing. There you go, done it. That's it. David, thank you so much for inviting us here today, and thank you for all the questions you had. You had great questions. I was really delighted to be able to share some ideas of how your research questions could be addressed experimentally. And I hope that's inspired you to think differently, and I hope some of you we get to work with you in the future. We offer weekly onboarding webinars, so if you want to see the tools in more detail, the right place to go is gorilla.se onboarding, and Ashley will make sure that that's sent in an email. And then from there you can click on the link, and there's an onboarding webinar every week where you can see the tools in more detail. There might be a pause over the summer, so if there isn't one immediately, that will be why there's a pause over the summer. We're in the big run up to our conference right at the moment. But there will be an if we're having a pause for the live onboarding webinars, then there will be a pre-recorded one that you can watch instead. Special pricing for students. Oh, and then the other thing that you get is if after you sign up to Gorilla, if you make a purchase within the first 7 days, I think you can get a further 50% discount. So if you're super keen, that's a way of saving yourself a little bit more money. And there's also a referral scheme inside Gorilla. So if you sign up to Gorilla and you invite other researchers to take part, you get some goodies for free. So you can get it a little bit cheaper if you're a student too. That's it from me. You're muted, David.
You're muted, David. Yeah, well, he's thanking you for sure.
Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All of you have a lovely weekend too. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed myself. Yeah.
Ciao, ciao.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.